Afternoon, we're going to get started, so I'd ask everyone to please take their seats. I'm fine. Thank you. Welcome. This afternoon, we gather to celebrate the legacy and honor the life of abolitionist and statesman Frederick Douglass, one of the most important Marylanders of all time. This new Frederick Douglass Square is a place for gathering and for expression of ideas and trying to change the world, and I understand that there's already been an effort to do that before we got here, so we're on our way. My name is Bonnie Thornton Dill. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities here at the University of Maryland, and I have the pleasure of emceeing this event today. And so on behalf of the entire university community, I welcome you to the new Frederick Douglass Square. I'm going to ask that we begin this program with a brief moment of silence. As many of you are aware, flags are flying at half-staff across the nation and the state of Maryland to honor the victims of the Paris attack. In this moment of silence, I ask you to honor victims of terroristic violence in Paris, but also Beirut, Nigeria, and throughout the world, including on U.S. soil. As we pause, please remember those who have experienced violence that intimidates, drives people from their homes, or makes them fearful to walk the streets of their own community. Let us begin. Thank you. So now I'd like to invite to the stage the brilliant soprano and professor of voice, Carmen Balthrop, who will be accompanied by flutist Kathleen Trahan. They will perform American Anthem, composed by songwriter Jean Shear.
By those who came before, the dream of a nation where freedom would endure. The work and prayers of centuries have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let them say of me, I was one who believed in sharing the blessings I've received. Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Each generation, from the plains to distant shore, with the gifts they were given, were determined to leave more. Valiant battles fought to conscience fought alone. These are the seeds from which America has grown. They have nothing to share, who fear in their heart there is no hero there. Know that quiet acts of dignity are that which fortifies the soul of a nation that will never, never die. Let them say of me, I was one who believed in sharing the blessings I received. Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, 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 America. I gave my best to you.
Thank you, Carmen and Kathleen, for that heartfelt and beautiful rendition of this anthem that celebrates American values of freedom and collective responsibility. And we're really lucky to have both Carmen and Kathleen as faculty members in our School of Music. Today, we dedicate this square as both a classroom and commemorative space where we will contemplate, celebrate, and extend Frederick Douglass's mission. As an aside, you know, it's taken this planning committee months to get together in person to plan and execute this dedication. Yet last week, in 24 hours or less, facilitated by tweets and social media, over 200 students gathered on this very square to stand in solidarity with students at the University of Missouri and students and college-goers nationwide around issues of racial injustice. So the students have already dedicated the square to the contemporary pursuit of the work of Mr. Douglass. Douglass's words, carved into the paving stones and on the curtain wall along with his statue, place the ideals he articulated so eloquently at the heart of this great institution. Yet his words and his image also challenge us to recommit to these ideals and to breathe 21st century meaning into the fundamental relationship between education and freedom. Today, we welcome Mr. Douglass home to the state of his birth, to the place where he endured incredible hardship and remarkable enlightenment, to a home at the center of the state's flagship campus, where he will serve as a reminder of the quest for freedom, justice, and the rights of all people, especially the oppressed, in a democracy. We are pleased to share this day with all of you, with so many of you, and are overjoyed to be joined by members of the Douglas family. Miss Nettie Washington Douglas, the great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Douglass, and also the great-granddaughter of Booker T. Washington. You don't get much more heavy-duty genealogy than that, do you? And her son, Mr. Kenneth Morris Jr. Later in the program, they will deliver special greetings from the Douglas family and on behalf of the Frederick Douglass Initiative, which they co-founded. The inspiration for this project, can you hear me over the helicopter, or should I pause? Okay. The inspiration for this project grew from a concern of distinguished university professor Ira Berlin, who decried that there was no recognition on this campus of, he said, and I quote, "the most important individual who ever trod the great earth of the old line state." He enlisted the assistance of a group of campus citizens that adopted the name North Stars, and over time they pressed the campus community to envision a memorial dedicated to Frederick Douglass. In the planning process, the North Stars learned from Vice President for Research Patrick O'Shea, a native of Cork, Ireland, of a parallel project to memorialize Frederick Douglass in Ireland. The initiative, the Frederick Douglass Ireland Project, co-directed by Don Mullen and Kristen Leary, who also join us today, helped us connect Douglass, the Marylander, with Ireland, a country that provided him support and helped him gain a global perspective on enslavement and oppression during and after his journey there in 1845. Through this transatlantic connection, the group was introduced to the work of the talented sculptor Andrew Edwards, who produced the nearly 8-foot-tall statue that graces this square. Andy hoped to join us today, but his ankle was broken and he was unable to travel. He sent the following email message, quote, "I feel very emotional about having an involvement in what is happening, so forgive the inclusion of this quote from Daniel O'Connor, the great emancipator of the Irish Catholics." And the quote from Daniel O'Connor reads, "My sympathy with distress is not confined within the narrow bounds of my own green island. No, it extends to every corner of the earth. My heart walks abroad, and wherever the miserable are to be succored, or the slave to be set free, there my spirit is at home, and I delight to dwell." End of quote. Well, it's taken 5 years or more to reach this day, and I would like to thank those who made it possible. First, I'd like to begin by thanking Ira and the North Stars, and I'd like to ask you all to stand as you are able. Stand, where are you? Or wave your hands if you're not. Keep standing, please, if you can, please keep standing. And then next, I'd like to thank the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, as well as the Maryland Historical Trust, a part of the Maryland Department of Planning, for their support, and ask that their representatives please stand. Thank you. I see you spread around. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge former Governor O'Malley, who is not here today, but also President Lowe, Provost Rankin, and my fellow deans for both state and campus-wide support of this project. Would you all stand or wave your hands wherever you are? And then I want to acknowledge the many dedicated faculty, staff, and contractors who presided over the planning, production, and installation of the square. Please stand also. And finally, don't sit yet, and finally, all of those who have donated financial resources, or time to creating a climate in which the life of Frederick Douglass could be understood, appreciated, and seen as an important symbol for the University of Maryland community, please stand. That should be just many of you. The point is, as you can see, it takes a village. You may be seated. So we thank all of you who made this event and this celebration possible, and we thank you for being out today. So now I'd like to invite to the stage the President of the University of Maryland, President Wallace Lowe, who, upon learning of this initiative, became an ardent supporter, committing financial and staff resources to make this day a reality. Thank you, President Lowe. Please come.
Thank you, Dean Thornton-Dill, and welcome everyone, faculty, staff, students, alumni, members of the community. Thank you for coming to today's unveiling of a living memorial. And of course, welcome to the members of the Douglass family from whom we will hear shortly. As far as we know, Frederick Douglass never set foot on this campus, at least during the course of his life. And yet today we welcome him here, not as a historical symbol, but as a living presence. In life, he escaped from Maryland, but today he comes home as a kind of teacher in residence. Through his struggles, his words, and his power to move people, Douglass showed us the transformative power of education. Throughout his life, he had some memorable statements. And one of them that I love is when he said, quote, "Education means emancipation," unquote. And I believe he was speaking more than about external shackles. Recently, I ran into a student at the Epley Rec Center where I spend time every night. And she said to me, "I come from rural Maryland, and coming to the University of Maryland has opened my eyes to diversity in ways that I've never experienced before." Well, throughout his life, Frederick Douglass fought for racial inclusiveness in an unwelcoming world, a task that is really too big for any one person in any one era, and therefore it is our commitment as the flagship institution, our commitment to diversity, to continue Frederick Douglass's work. The talents and cooperation of many people have helped build the square, and it is these talents and cooperation that will help us develop a more diverse and more inclusive campus. When we unveil the statue, notice that Frederick Douglass is leaning forward because he wants to make sure that we hear what he's saying. When you look at that statue, his arms points forward because he wants to make sure that we are looking into the future. Frederick Douglass calls us to continue the great work he started, a work that it is not yet finished, and it is our obligation to continue. It is my privilege now to introduce to you Rashawn Baker, the executive of Prince George's County, and a very dear friend and partner in developing a greater College Park. Rashawn?
Forgive me, I was trying to get my marching orders. I was written a very beautiful speech, which I'm not going to give. This is one of those occasions when it's personal. I do want to thank Dr. Lowe, Dean Dill, and Professor Berlin. If we can give them a round of applause. So, this is personal for me. As a student, not at this great university, but another one just down the road, Howard University. Many times, especially as one who is the first in his family to go to college, and a very not so good student, I spent a lot of times in the library just trying to figure out what I was going to do in life. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to get there. And I was sitting in the library looking through some notes that I had gotten in my history class, which then became my major because I fell in love with it. But there were a couple of quotes from Frederick Douglass. And I've tried to write these from memory, so the professors out here, please don't hold them against me. My children, if they were here, who are young adults, would tell you I said these things to them many times and they got sick of hearing them. But it got me through 4 years of college and 3 years of law school and a lot of time right here as your county executive. It was one that Douglass wrote. He said, on what to do with the Negro. Do nothing. It is your doing with the Negro which is his greatest misfortune. Then one that they really got sick of hearing was, without crime against man nor gospel, the Negro has become the Jean Valjean of American society. He has escaped the gallows, and hence all presumptions are against him. And one that inspired a painting that is in my office today, he said of John Brown, his zeal was infinitely more superior than mine. Mine is like the taper lamp. His was like the burning sun. I could live for the Negro. John Brown could die for the Negro. Those are the things that shape my life, that touch me, that made Frederick Douglass not someone in a history book, not some statue, not someone stuck in 1860, but someone alive for me today, ever changing, ever pushing, ever agitating. That is the call of Frederick Douglass. It wasn't to the people and men and women of the time that he lived in. It was for them in the future. And so when we see young people, like the people we saw here earlier before I got here, and the young man who I met with, when we see them, we see Frederick Douglass. We see what this will mean for generations to come. So that when they come back and visit this campus, and they see young people voicing a change, they'll remember Frederick Douglass and what he's meant. So I close with this, not Frederick Douglass, but with Frantz Fanon, which was really the call of what Frederick Douglass had for everyone. And that is, Frantz Fanon said, each generation must define its mission, fulfill it or betray it. Each generation must define its mission, fulfill it or betray it. We are fulfilling ours today. God bless you.
I would now like to invite to the podium a very loyal and proud alum and a member of the Maryland House of Delegates, Alonzo Washington.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's do this, man. Look, we just won a game yesterday, right? Come on, go Terps. All right, I want to first thank President Lowe for having me here, the staff, faculty, and students. I especially want to thank or recognize the student activists here on campus. I want to let you know that we believe in you. We believe in your voice. We want you to continue to raise your voice on this campus. We want to continue to raise the issues that are prevalent to our communities, not only on campus, but throughout the country and throughout the state of Maryland. We want you to stand for equality for all. Frederick Douglass said, "Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe." And what you're doing on campus right now is exactly that, making sure that we don't have these issues of oppression, of economic injustice that constantly plagues our communities. So we're here today to honor a great man in Frederick Douglass. He fought for equality, equity, and education, for slaves, helping to end the ban on teaching slaves how to read and write. He also fought for the equality of women in the women's suffrage movement in the 1800s. He fought to end the oppression of slavery during those times. And for that, we're honoring him today. But as we name and honor leaders on this campus that have fought for human rights and equality for all, we must recognize that now is a time to remove that same honor from leaders who have divided our community. I'll end with a quote that is not by Frederick Douglass, but is by Martin Luther King Jr. And I think about this as I move about this state, move about Prince George's County, and even while I was here on campus. Martin Luther King said in one of his famous addresses, he said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it does bend towards justice." But I hope you don't mind if I amend it a bit to say that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it does indeed bend towards justice. But it does not bend on its own. It bends because there were women and there were men who sweat and sacrifice, who pulled at it and tugged on it. Let us decide today that as history catches its breath, that we're going to be among the generation of people who pull on it and tug on it and make it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. It's always great to have our alums return home. Next, I'd like to invite to the podium the members of the Douglass family whom I introduced to you earlier, Mrs. Nettie Washington Douglass and Mr. Kenneth Morris, Jr.
Oh, you look wonderful from here. Absolutely wonderful. It is such a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And I want to start by thanking University President Wallace Lowe for inviting the Frederick Douglass family to this great event. I want to thank Dr. Ira Berlin and the North Stars for having the vision to make this event a reality. A special thank you to Don Mullen for joining us today all the way from Ireland. Lastly, I want to thank members of the University of Maryland student body, you've heard a lot about them today, for the inspiration that they have already drawn from this statue and this square, and the ways in which they will contribute to our social evolution. I suspect that they know that Douglass said, quote, "Power concedes nothing without demand," end of quote. This places infinite responsibility in the hands of those that demand. Now, before I go on, I've been asked to share something that I hadn't planned to do. But I was talking with President Lowe, and he's already kind of explained the statue that you're going to see with Frederick Douglass leaning forward, the hand stretched out, and you will see a beautiful cape around him that actually was taken from a cape that Daniel O'Connell wore. And the wind. How many of you have noticed that the wind's been blowing a little bit this afternoon? Well, I have a secret that I started sharing. Frederick Douglass is so special to me, and I could stay here forever and talk about that, but I won't. But I just want to share that it occurred to me several years ago that he was communicating with me. Often when I would do things like this, and when he was being honored, I would say a little prayer before I was asked to come up and speak, and I would tell him, I'm here for you, we're here for you. I would like to know that you're here in spirit with us, but mostly with me. And this particular time, this wind, it was amazing. At the right time, this wind, and it was a perfectly calm, this wind came, and I got chills, and I went, okay. And I even had somebody comment, where'd that come from? I said, I know where it's from. So I was a little skeptical of sharing that because I'm actually superstitious, and I thought if I started sharing it, it would go away. So I was in Ireland, I think it was 2012 for the first time, 2 weeks before President Obama came over, and he got to see the statue, the resin form, before I did. So Don Mullen and I were walking down some steps to go to Daniel O'Connell's gravesite, where I was asked to place a wreath. And I shared this with Don because there was something about him, that was the first time we had met, but there was something about Don that I felt he would understand. So I just started telling him about the wind, and we started walking down the steps, and he said, with his accent, Nettie, the wind is here, and he felt it. So now I feel a little more secure to share because he witnessed it. Okay, so but it's very, very special. And as I was sitting in the chair, the curtain was billowing, and I knew he was letting me know he was in there. I just know he was. While he wandered, yes, while he wandered in every direction, searching for and bestowing personal sovereignty to bustling American cities, to England and Ireland, to the South, and to the very seat of authority, the image of Douglass that we recognize today was forged here in Maryland. Frederick Douglass believed as a human being that all of us, regardless of our race, gender, religion, or sexual orientation, we were born to live free and equal. How easy it would have been for a man born in chains to have the opposite view. Frederick Douglass believed as an American that the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were conceived to elevate every citizen of this great country. How easy it would have been for a man born without the benefits of citizenship and buried beneath that nation's injustice to reject its most sacred documents. Frederick Douglass believed as a person that reconciliation and forgiveness made us better when he said to his former owner, quote, I love you, but hate slavery, end of quote. How easy it would have been for a man that faced so much misplaced loathing throughout his life to carry the burden of hatred to his grave. He did not. Frederick Douglass' belief in goodness was often beyond the logic of personal experience and circumstance. This is why I hold so closely to my heart the spirit of the man I was lucky enough to call my great-great-grandfather. And though I cling tightly to this legacy, he is not mine alone. Frederick Douglass gave his work and his spirit as a birthright to all of us. On behalf of his family, I would like to say that we are humbled and honored by this dynamic bronze statue set here upon the axis of reflection and agitation. At the same time, we pray the spirit of Frederick Douglass will live intensely in your hearts and in the hearts of people everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. That was beautiful. I am so honored to be here today. And I find it hard to imagine sometimes that I am the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, this great American hero. And you know, every time I tell people what my relationship is to him, not only is it a mouthful trying to spit out all of those greats, but it sometimes makes me feel very far removed. And you may be sitting here having a hard time trying to imagine what my connection is to Frederick Douglass. It's like trying to picture what $1 billion looks like with all of those zeros. But I bet everybody in here knew a grandparent or even a great-grandparent. And that's how close I feel to Frederick, because you see, my great-grandmother, Fanny Douglass, to whom I was very close, she lived to be 103 years old, and she met Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl. And I remember being a little boy and sitting on her lap, and she would tell me firsthand stories about the man she would call the man with the great big white hair. And when I stopped to think that hands that actually touched the great Frederick Douglass also touched mine, in a sense, even with all of those greats, I can say we stand one person away from history. I also want to thank President Lowe for inviting us to be here today. Thank you to the University of Maryland staff and faculty for working tirelessly to make this project come to fruition. And to the distinguished Professor Ira Berlin, whose vision inspired this glorious installation, thank you for your commitment, dedication, and leadership over the last several years. As we heard, this dynamic statue is the creation of renowned Anglo-Irish sculptor Andrew Edwards, and it was inspired by the vision of Douglass family friend Don Mullen and the Frederick Douglass Ireland Project, whose directors are here with us today. Thank you, Don, Kristen Leary, Christine Keneally, for your commitment to highlighting the inspirational role that the great Irish liberator Daniel O'Connell, Ireland, and the Irish people played in Frederick Douglass's life. Humbling is the only way I can describe what it feels like to have his blood flowing through my veins. Frederick Douglass was born into slavery, not too far from where we have gathered here today. He came from a world that most of us could never imagine, a place that he saw as being unjust. At the tender age of 9, he identified the key to ending his enslavement when he heard his master say, "Education makes a man unfit to be a slave." The young boy understood that knowledge was power and it would be his key to freedom. Knowledge is indeed power, and education can make each one of us, no matter our position in the world, unfit to be enslaved. Frederick Douglass was an abolitionist, an orator, author, intellectual, statesman, and agitator. If he were alive today, the fight against modern slavery, racism, and inequality would be his fight. And he would call upon young people to raise their voices and agitate against injustice wherever it exists, in the same way he raised his voice and agitated to effect change so many years ago. As we've seen with the student demonstrations on campuses around the country over the past few weeks, and as we saw on campus earlier today, the fight for equality is an ongoing struggle. To the students in attendance here today, Frederick Douglass would encourage you to do exactly what you've been doing over the past week. Agitate, agitate, agitate when you see something as being unjust. I was pleased to see that before the statue was officially unveiled, you used it as a focal point of inspiration for activism toward the racism that exists on college campuses. I stand with you and students all over the country in solidarity in this movement. This dynamic bronze sculpture places you and the University of Maryland at the forefront in the fight against racism and inequality that exists everywhere. I encourage you and the University of Maryland to unite and work together to become a model of national activism led by the spirit of Frederick Douglass. Your voices are being heard and momentum is building. We saw evidence of this a few days ago when students successfully convinced Georgetown University to rename buildings that reflect the school's ties to slavery. Many consider these names and the names of other slaveholders and segregationists odious. Georgetown students mobilized and decided it was time for these badges of servitude and racism to come down. As we gather here today to honor Frederick Douglass, I hope that we remember the debt that we owe to him and all of those who came before us, upon whose shoulders we stand. Freedom's torch has been passed, and it's our obligation by birthright to continue the fight for liberation and equality. I pray today that this magnificent statue reminds us all, and all the generations of UMD students to come, of our inherent dignity and of our duty to uphold the inalienable rights of all members of the human family. The fight against injustice was Frederick Douglass's fight, and it should be our fight too. Thank you.
Ms. Douglass, Mr. Morris, thank you for your words, and thank you for extending the touch that you felt as a child through your grandmother to each of us here and to the campus at the University of Maryland. Thank you. Next, I invite to the stage Mr. Robert Bland. Mr. Bland is a doctoral candidate and an instructor in our Department of History. His dissertation, Requiem for Reconstruction, explores the connection between the South Carolina Low Country and historical memory of post-emancipation America. Douglass took special notice of events in the Low Country, and Mr., soon-to-be Dr. Bland, will read one of Douglass's most famous speeches.
Good afternoon. I am honored to read a brief passage from a speech by Frederick Douglass entitled, "What to the Negro is 4th of July?" Douglass delivered this speech at a 4th of July ceremony in 1852 in Rochester, New York. The event, which was hosted by the Ladies of Rochester Anti-Slavery Society, was part of Douglass's larger speaking tour where he sought to further the abolitionist cause and lead the fight for racial equality in the United States. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called here to speak today? What have I, or those that I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom, of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits, to express the devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? But such is not the state of the case. I say with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included with the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessing in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, and prosperity and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and to call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that this dangerous activity, to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, towering up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrecoverable ruin. I can today take up the plaintive lament of a peeled and woe-smitten people. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat, Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they carried us away captive, required of us a song. And they who wasted us required of mirth, saying, Sing us one of those songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If we forget, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of those millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of that sorrowful day, may I, with my right hand forget her cunning, and my left tongue cleave the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be the treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make us reproach before God and the world. My fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day, and its most popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondsman, making this wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the said character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on the 4th of July. Whether we turn to declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to the false of the future. What to the American slave is the 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all the other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, all thin veil to cover up the crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth of guilty practices more shocking and bloody than there are the people of these United States at this very hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And as our final speaker, I want to invite to the stage distinguished university professor and renowned historian of slavery, Ira Berlin. Ira.
What a crowd. My name has been mentioned several times today, and in this case it was mentioned in a good circumstance, because that's not always true, and I'm pleased to have that. But in truth, Frederick Douglass Square and our great statue of Frederick Douglass Square, which has already become a site for the struggle of social justice, is not my work and my work alone. I've had many, many people help us. I would thank President Lowe. We were just musing whether, in fact, money is the mother's milk of squares. But without it, of course, it would not happen, and that's most appreciated, as whether our other donors. I would like really especially to thank my fellow members of the North Stars. who worked on this project continually for the last 5 years. It's often very difficult to keep one's attention over that period. Lots of other things are happening. Lots of other parades are passing by, and they're all really interesting, and they're all all perfectly will make the world better. But we stuck to our subject. There were lots of dead ends, and we walked down those alleys, and we walked back out, and eventually we're here today. The North Stars took their name from Frederick Douglass's newspaper, and Frederick Douglass took his name for the newspaper from the star, which slaves followed north. And I'd like to think that this was an important stop along the way. In March of 1965, Lincoln delivered his second inaugural address, which is generally thought of as his greatest speech. Frederick Douglass is there. We see in the background of the podium of people standing behind him on the Capitol. His great face there, and afterwards Douglass went to the White House, which was then called the Presidential Palace, and the guards, of course, blocked him from getting in because he, after all, was black. But Lincoln saw him at the door across the room, and he invited him in, and he asked Douglass, "Well, what did you think of the speech?" And Douglass replied, "Mr. President, you have more important things to attend to your guests." But Lincoln insisted. He said, "Douglass, of all the people who are here, it is your opinion that I most valuable." And Douglass told him those words were sacred. Douglass was born a slave, as we know, and the president, he speaks to us as a man who rose to be the friend of presidents and an international figure. Frederick Douglass Place carries that legacy. It is an international place that carries the legacy of Douglass and everything he stands for. As a man born a slave, Douglass was determined not to be a slave. And once he was free, he was determined to add his voice and his incredible energy to destroy slavery. And once he was determined to knock down slavery, he was determined to expand his understanding to all of those barriers to equality of men and women. He became a suffragette. He became a labor leader. He became a defender of Native Americans and immigrants. For Douglass, the formula was simple. He seized the Declaration of Independence, the great promise, all men are created equal. He made a demand similar to that made by Martin Luther King in our own lifetimes, that become a reality. And he became a leading defender of what have we come to call human rights. Now, in creating this square and this magnificent statue, we have honored Douglass. But in truth, we've also created a burden for ourselves. We now have to meet We have to embrace his ideas of inclusion, a common country, a common citizenship, equal rights, a common destiny, of education, of self-improvement, and of course equality for women and men in all times and all places. It's already been spoken that this place has already been dedicated, and some 200 students did that for us. They took selfies. They sent them to their comrades at the University of Missouri. They stated that they were with this larger struggle. Frederick Douglass Square now will become a rallying point for social justice on our campus. It will be part of our tradition, and I think that Douglass could not be more pleased. I know that the North Stars could not be more pleased. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, moral and physical. But it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. Thank you so much.
Ira, thank you for that moving tribute and brief history lesson, and for your time and your dedication towards realizing this memorial. Now, any of those of you who have ever worked with Ira knows that when he sets his mind on a goal, you have two choices: get on board or get out of the way, right? At this time, I'd like to ask our fellow North Stars and the invited friends to come back to the stage. Actually, Ira, I shouldn't have had you sit down. To come back to the stage. Okay. And so please come back. And we'd like your help in unveiling the statue. Yes, around the stage will do. This stage doesn't have very far to fall, but I don't know.
Great job.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Ira and I are going to count down. And we're going to ask you all to join us in doing that. We're going to start at 5, and we're going to count down to 1, and then we will unveil the statue.
We can do that.
We can do that. And the sun is coming. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Wahoo!
You can,
Isn't it?
to close the ceremony, you can return to your seats if you'd like or you can stay here. Whatever. We're playing this by ear now. To close the ceremony, I'd like to direct your attention to the University of Maryland Gospel Choir, who will perform the African American spiritual "O Freedom" under the direction of Dwayne Gregory. No, that's not Dwayne Gregory. I know. That's what I have in my script, but right, okay.
Freedom over me. And before I be asleep, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And before I be asleep, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
We're going to sing one more song. We have one more song from the choir.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let segregation turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let race hatred turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let misery turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on walking, keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
You can go back to your seats now. Yes, we want to thank the University of Maryland Gospel Choir for their stirring performance. This concludes the formal program, and I would now like to invite everyone present to join us inside Hornbeck Library for a reception and the launch of the Frederick Douglass Scholarship and Legacy Exhibition, which will be on display through December 7th. Thank you again for sharing this special occasion with us.